What's up everyone, it's Grim here, and this is the first in a series of light-hearted lore videos I'm going to be doing for the various chapters, factions, clans, whatever you want to call them, for the various races that will be coming up in the new MMO Eternal Crusade. Now, I know what many of you are going to be thinking, here we go, it's going to be Dark Angel, it's going to be all the ones that Grim likes. Well, it's not. It is going to be a Space Marine one, I apologise, but I went for what is probably the most iconic of all of the Space Marine factions with regards to the Warhammer universe, and that is of course the Ultramarines, and they are the 13th Legion of the original 20 Space Marine Legions. Now, this Loyalist Legion was later reorganised and divided into chapters according to the Codex Astartes. Their Primarch, Rubok Gilliam, whose leadership, not to mention his authorship of the Codex Astartes, were seen as instrumental in basic humanity surviving the Horus Heresy. Because their Primarch wrote the text that defines the very essence of Space Marine chapters, the Ultramarines follow this codex extremely strict. The only deviation being the recent formation of the Tyrannic War Veterans, and this is a company basically comprised of nothing but veterans from wars and battles with Tyranids. So with the summary out the way, let's take a look at how the 13th Legion came into being, better known as the Ultramarines. Now, before we can even start looking at a specific Space Marine Legion, we need to first look at how this all came about. Now, part of the Emperor's vision for human unification was the Primarch Project, meant to be the creation of 20 superhumans, almost demigods, to lead the Emperor's forces to reclaim the galaxy in his name. It also saw the creation of Space Marine Legions from the gene seed samples that survived the scattering of the Primarchs by the Chaos Gods, which we're going to touch on in a second. Now, to touch on the caption briefly, the little joke about a pinch of me, a pinch of animal DNA, is not actually a lie. It is canon lore. These 20 Primarchs weren't just clones of the Emperor. He actually manipulated his own DNA to create these, either by taking away something or adding something. It's generally rumoured that this is how the Space Wolves got to be slightly different with their fangs, that they were created using animal DNA, injected into the Emperor's own DNA to create this mutated strand. But that's a subject for a different video. Let's get on with the lore of Rubok Gilliam and the Ultramarines. Like the other Primarchs, Rubok Gilliam was taken as an infant by the powers of chaos, and removed to the far-flung world in an effort to prevent the coming of the Age of the Imperium. Now, the infant Gilliam's capsule fell to Earth on Macragge, where it was discovered by a group of noblemen hunting in the forest. Inside the capsule, they found a child surrounded by a glowing aura. He was taken back to Connor, one of the two consuls who governed Macragge, who adopted the infant as his son and named him Reboot. Reboot was a prodigy, growing fast in both body and intellect. By the age of 10, he had mastered every subject the widest men on Macragge could teach him, and his insights into matters of history, philosophy, science often stunned his elders. However, his greatest talents were as a military leader. These talents led his father to give him command of an expeditionary force to Lirum, a mountainous region in the far north of Macragge. Those wild inhabitants had terrorized the civilized regions for years and successfully resisted every previous military campaign. Not only did Reboot fight a brilliant campaign, but he also earned the respect of the Wildmen, who never again threatened the more civilized parts of Macragge. However, on his return to the capital, Reboot found the city in chaos, as his father, co-consul Gallen, had attempted a coup. Gallen led a faction of Macragge's nobility who were used to enjoying their wealth and position at the expense of armies of slaves, and resented Connor's legislation favouring the common people, among whom he was immensely popular. Approaching the city, Reboot and his soldiers saw the city in chaos, being sacked by mobs of Gillen's men while the consul house was under siege. Reboot left his men to restore order to the city. While he rushed to the consul's house and lifted the siege, only to find his father close to death. Surrounded by his loyal bodyguards, he had been mortally wounded by an assassin in Gillian's employ. With his dying breath, he told Reboot who was responsible. Reboot swiftly crushed the rebellion, and amid a wave of popular relief, assumed the title of sole consul of Macragge. Gallian and his co-conspirators were executed, and their lands and wealth redistributed to the people. With superhuman energy, Reboot reorganised Macragge's entire social structure, creating a meritocracy, where office and honours were given to the hard-working rather than the wealthy and influential. Under his leadership, Macragge prospered like never before. When Reboot was persecuting his war against the Illidan rebels, the Emperor of Mankind and his armies had reached the neighbouring planet of Espandor. It was there that the Emperor heard stories of the extraordinary son of Consul Connor, and realised that he had found one of his lost Primarchs. However, due to the unexpected warp storm, his ship was thrown off course, and by the time he reached Macragge, Reboot had been ruling for almost 5 years. And when the Emperor reached Macragge, he found a world that was self-sufficient, prosperous, with a strong and well-equipped military, and engaging in trade with neighbouring systems. Impressed, the Emperor assigned command of the Ultramarines, Space Marine Legion, to Guilliman, and relocated the Legion's forward base to Macragge. That, I suppose, makes up for all the missed Christmases. With the exception of the Lunar Wolves, no Legion conquered as many worlds, or conquered worlds as fast, or left conquered worlds in such a good state during the Great Crusade as the Ultramarines. Wherever Guilliam liberated a world, he would not move on until he had set up a self-sufficient defence system, left advisors behind to create industry, set up trade routes with the rest of the Imperium, and a form of government whose first concern would always be the well-being of the people. As Ultramar grew into a small stellar empire in its own right, Guilliam created a supremely efficient military machine centred around Macragge that provided the Ultramarines with a steady flow of new recruits. Between this factor and the minimal casualties suffered as a result of Guilliam's tactical genius, the Ultramarines soon became the largest of all Space Marines legions. Now remember, this is not chapters, these are when they were legions. So try and understand how many Space Marines that would be. It was so large, in fact, that an organised unit above the company was required. The Ultramarines were thus organised into chapters, numbering 22 just before the Battle of Karth. At the time of the Horus Heresy, it is estimated that the Ultramarine Legion numbered around 250,000 Space Marines. Before Horus declared his treachery against the Emperor, he ordered the Ultramarines Legion to assemble for a war in the Viridian system, basically in the arse end of nowhere, far to the galactic south, claiming that the system was under attack by an Orc invasion force from the Garakhalala Empire. That's not actually how it's pronounced. Ultramar was close enough for an assault against Viridian, so Guilliam ordered his legion to assemble in the Karth system. As Guilliam and his fleet arrived in Karth, they knew something was wrong, because none of their astropaths could get messages through the warp, and the storms were interfering with the navigation of their ships. They were blocked from the rest of the Imperium. It was at this moment the traitor forces of the World-Bearer Legion attacked, rendering the Ultramarines unable to participate in much of the Battle of Terra. Now, upon learning of the treachery, Guilliam immediately set course for Terra, destroying Chaos reinforcements along the way, but arrived after Horus had already been defeated and the traitor legions scattered. Now, at this point I will quickly interject a little summary of what happened on that battle barge. Now, this is a summary. Okay, this video could span hours if I just talked about what happened on that battle barge. But, in essence, Sanguinium, the Primarch of the Blood Angels, and the Emperor boarded Horus's battle barge. They managed to fight their way all the way to the bridge. The Emperor and Sanguinium had been separated by this point, and Sanguinium charged in when he saw Horus. They fought, and unfortunately Sanguinium was killed. But not before he had managed to injure Horus. He had get a chink in Horus's armour, and the Emperor and Horus finally met. They clashed. The Emperor didn't want to kill his son. Horus was like, I don't fucking care, I'm going to kill you, father. Eventually, the Emperor saw that he had to kill his favoured son, and he did, through the wound that Sanguinium had created. Upon his very dying breath, Horus realised what he had done. He felt his love for his father once again, and died. So our final body count ended with Horus being dead, Sanguinium dead, and the Emperor, well, like this. Now, back to the Ultramarines. Because of this, the Ultramarines were one of the few legions at full strength in the aftermath of the heresy. Thus, Guilliam and his Ultramarines bore much of the burden of holding the Imperium together against aliens and Chaos forces. During this time, the Ultramarines recruited heavily from Ultramar and eventually counted for over half of the loyalist Marines left. Apart from leading his Ultramarines in countless battles across the galaxy, Guilliam also accepted an extraordinary appointment as Lord Commander of the Imperium, With the Emperor crippled and Lord Malcalidor dead, it fell to Gilliam to reorganise the Council of Terror into a ruling body capable of running the Imperium without their sovereign. Around a decade after the heresy ended, the Imperium finally reached a point of stability. After the Horus Heresy, Reboot set himself to create the Codex Astartes, which would define the tactics and the organisation of all Space Marines, from battlefield strategies to squad markings. Most important of these changes was the division of the legions into 1,000-strong chapters. One of the chapters would retain the heraldry of the original legion, but the others would be given a new name and symbol. In doing so, Gilliam hoped to divide the power of the space to ensure that a civil war on the scale of the Horus Heresy could never again occur. This, however, caused dissension among the remaining Primarchs. Regal Dawn, Vulcan, and Leman Russ opposed the splitting of their legions, while Gilliam himself was supported by Khan and Korax. Neither side was willing to relent, and the controversy grew more intense, with Regal Dawn calling Gilliam a coward for not having participated in the Siege of Terra, and Gilliam accusing Dawn of being a rebel for the refusal to follow the Codex. The situation threatened to bring the Imperium into a new civil war. When the Imperial Fist Strike Cruiser Terrible Angel was fired upon by the Imperial Navy, Dawn finally relented and split his legion. Now, many of you may be asking, Grim, you've just stopped. What happened to Reboot Gilliam? What happened to the Ultramarines in those years? Because we are talking about the Horus Heresy here, a long, long time ago, and much has happened since then. New enemies have emerged, new struggles have happened, the Tyranid attack on Macragge itself. There's an awful lot to cover. But I don't want this video to be about the history of the Ultramarines. I want it to be about the flavour of what you're going to get into should you be playing them. Hence, I've done their founding, and I also want to give you a little taste of their culture as they stand now. Now, what you have to know about the Ultramarines is that they pride themselves on the strict adherence to the Codex Astartes, and view themselves as an exemplar for all other Space Marine chapters. They believe, and not without cause, that their Primarch's teachings have moulded the Adeptus Astartes and the Imperium as a whole in the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, and that it is their responsibility to continue to serve as this paragon. For this reason, they are viewed as straight-laced and somewhat elitist by their brother chapters, from the more chaotic Space Wolves to even their own successor chapters such as the Mortificators. The chapter treats deviation from the Codex as a crime tantamount to heresy, punishable by death oath. Exile from the chapter on a suicidal mission to combat the forces of chaos inside the Eye of Terror. To the Ultramarines, the Codex is more than a set of rules. It represents discipline and respect for order, the key virtues that separate the Ultramarines from their brethren from the traitor legions. Disobeying the Codex, even for a noble cause, is simply the first steps towards the belief that the ends justifies the means, and therefore leading to total anarchy. Now, the Ultramarines are also strongly influenced by their unique history as stalwarts of Ultramar and its human population. Gilliam founded a culture based on striving for the common good, and the Ultramarines are proud to uphold these beliefs. Where other Space Marines are aloof and sometimes contemptuous of the Emperor's lesser mortals, most Ultramarines are used to working closely with ordinary people in Ultramar, and regard any human life, no matter how seemingly insignificant, as sacred and worthy of protection. They are also harshly intolerant when they encounter lesser behaviours, such as greed, selfishness, corruption, on the other Imperial worlds. Now, to give you guys an idea of this, if any of you have ever looked at the Inquisition or anything like that, now, during the invasion of Ultmar, the Inquisitor, Namir Sazur... I'll never be able to pronounce it, but anyway, of the Ordos Malleus, noted that the people of Karth regarded her and her entourage with curiosity, but with no visible apprehension. She remarked that it was the first world of the Imperium she had ever visited where people felt they truly had nothing to hide from the Inquisition. Now I'll leave you with the battle cry of the Ultramarines. Courage and honour, we march for Macragge.